It's hard to believe, but it took me to the big 2026 to finally play Elden Ring, and I have so much to say about it. This game wholeheartedly deserves all the praise it's been given. It truly is one of the greatest games ever made in my opinion. That's not to say it's free of flaws, as many people have pointed out by this point. Whether to be contrarian or if the critiques are justified are up for you to decide. For me, while this game was far from perfect, its shortcomings didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because where the game shines, it shines so brightly that it vastly overshadows where it falls short. To me, this game is the definition of being greater than the sum of its parts, and I want to detail exactly why that is, so get comfy while you listen to me wax lyrical about this modern masterpiece. Quick disclaimer, I give a lot of background on my history as a gamer here, which sets the stage for why Elden Ring was so impactful on me, so if you aren't interested in hearing about my history with other games and just want to hear about Elden Ring, jump to the timestamp below. Thanks. Before I can really begin my review of the game, I have to give you context on my whole gaming experience leading up to playing this game. I won't bore you with the details because this video will surely be long enough, but the reason I got into making YouTube videos was Destiny 2, a game I picked up in 2017 and didn't stop playing until 2025. Hence my reasoning for missing out on all the Elden Ring hype at the time. I knew it was a highly regarded game, but I had no will to play it because I was too in love with Destiny 2 and making content on the game. Make fun of me if you want, but it's true. I was truly passionate about that game, and because of that, I missed out on many mainstream games over the years. The two that I still carved out time for were Spider-Man and God of War, two franchises that I grew up playing and I've always loved. Outside of those, I was a one-game man. But Bungie wound up destroying the game in 2025, leading me to move on and experience new games. So I've been working through a backlog of games a mile long. Being a gamer, I had heard so much about these games and their brutal difficulty. I knew they had an adoring fan base, so I wanted to see what all the hype was about. So in April of 2025, I played Sekiro: Shadows Die twice. This was my first From Software title, and I absolutely adored it. I was lucky enough to stream the game, so I didn't have to go to wikis to see how to complete quests. I had chatters who thankfully didn't spoil anything for me, but they would guide me on how to do certain quests. As a result, I was able to see everything the game had to offer. There were so many insane hidden secrets, it made the world feel so mysterious and exciting. My first playthrough was around 60 hours long. I did every single thing that the game had to offer that you could do in a single playthrough, but of course I couldn't do the Shura ending. Because the Shura ending had a unique boss fight, I knew I had to play it again because I didn't want to play the game and not fight every boss. So I replayed it so I could fight Emma and Ishin Ashina. After this, I still wanted to play through and see all the endings, so I did 2 more playthroughs for that platinum trophy. And then I did a 5th playthrough where I beat the game in one 5-hour stream, just to show how far I had come. Bosses that took me hours to complete in my first playthrough, I could beat in 1 or 2 attempts. It was such a thrilling journey to go from bumbling rookie to a true master shinobi. I'd played Sekiro first because I had heard it was the toughest FromSoft game and the most unlike the others. So since I was a blank slate, I figured it was best to start with the outlier so that I didn't develop bad habits from playing the Souls games first. This turned out to be a great choice in the end. After I finished up with Sekiro, I just went and played a bunch of other games on my backlog. It wasn't until this past March when I decided it was now time to finally play the Souls series. I started with Demon Souls, the originator of the Souls formula, and I absolutely hated that game. I thought, is this really what people enjoy? It was not even that the game was difficult, it really wasn't. It was just extremely tedious and annoying for the sake of being annoying. I have a full review on every FromSoft game if you want more in-depth analysis, but the point is, I thought to myself, this is really gonna suck slogging through these games because I didn't enjoy this one at all. Thankfully, Dark Souls 1 was a much more enjoyable experience. I really loved the interconnected world and the gameplay and so much about it. The variety of levels and enemies to fight, the mysterious worlds and obtuse quest design that FromSoft is famous for, it clicked with me big time. Then with Dark Souls 2, it was much of the same. I think this game is vastly overhated. I actually thought it was really good. Then came Dark Souls 3, my favorite of the bunch. The combat in this game and the step up in difficulty on the bosses made me truly enjoy the boss fights in combat like no game before it. I felt FromSoft really hit their stride with the 3rd iteration. The last one for me to play was Bloodborne, and I had heard how incredible this one in particular was, but it really didn't click with me. I thought the boss fights were very lackluster, and that was a big reason I wanted to play these games. And with Sekiro being my first entry to the FromSoft series of games, it set my expectations for boss fights unreasonably high, as now having played all the games, I can confidently say that it has the best boss fights in the whole series. But one good thing about loving boss fights is Elden Ring is full of them. I classify boss fights as any enemy with a boss style health bar, so this does not include invader type enemies. In my save files for the game, I recorded every boss kill, and the file for the main game has 143 bosses, and the DLC file had 37. Now, quantity does not mean quality, and a lot of these bosses are reused throughout the game, and most boss fights don't come close to the near perfection of Sword Saint Ishin, but as someone whose primary motivation to play these games was fun and challenging boss fights, I could not be more thrilled with the litany of boss encounters that you come across in Elden Ring. Again, that is not to say that they are all wonderful or balanced or anything like that, but I just found it very satisfying how often I would come across a boss encounter on my playthrough. So now that you know my Souls journey, I guess we can finally jump into why Elden Ring is my favorite game From Software has ever made. As mentioned, I was in my own little Destiny 2 bubble for about 8 years, so amazingly, I was about as spoiler-free as a gamer can be going into my playthrough. Sure, I had seen clips of Promise Concert Radahn, and I knew about the story of Let Me Solo Her in the Malenia boss fight, and I had even seen clips of Star Scourge Radahn's fight. But outside of those, I didn't know of any other bosses in the game. I also knew nothing of the story, though having played all the other games, I know nothing of their stories, either because A, they're incredibly vague and tough to figure out on your own, and B, unless they are specifically story driven, I don't really play games for the story, I play them for the gameplay. I had over 8,000 hours in Destiny 2, and I could only tell you very surface level details about their stories. I have said that I love God of War, and the original title was all about killing Ares, the God of War, but again, I could tell you very little about the stories in those games. So with Elden Ring, I am equally clueless. I couldn't tell you about what is going on with the story of this game, and to be honest, it didn't impact my journey one bit. The beauty of these games and them being an RPG is, to me, you sort of write your own story. Your journey is unique to you, and in Elden Ring, that is more true than any previous title. Sure, in Dark Souls 1 and 2, you can go a few different ways out the gate, meaning your journey may be slightly different from someone else's, but by and large, you do things in a similar order. In Elden Ring, it is fully open world, and you can truly go where you want with very little restrictions. I love this. I'll get back to the open world soon, but first, a little more background on me. Before I got into Destiny 2, I bought myself a Switch in June of 2017 and got Breath of the Wild. That is the game that got me back into gaming. Because of school and establishing a career for myself, I really didn't game much at all from like 2009 to 2017. I played the Batman Arkham games and GTA 5 and dabbled a little bit in D1, but by and large, I was focused on friends and my career. It wasn't until 2017 and I was somewhat established that I really got back into it. Normally, I was always outside in the summer biking and hiking and partying and what have you, but in 2017, I would stay cooped up inside just exploring the world of Breath of the Wild. I was in no hurry to finish that game. I'm a bit OCD by nature and I don't really half-ass anything. It's honestly a blessing and a curse. I either give something my all or I don't really bother. So there was no chance of me mainlining Breath of the Wild. I wanted to see and find everything that world had to offer, and if you have played the game, you know that is no small feat. But I was just enjoying the game and exploring. To me, games are supposed to be fun first and foremost, and you should play them in the way that is most enjoyable to you. For me, that is just journeying through the world and discovering all the secrets. I didn't care about quote-unquote beating that game, as in finishing the final boss. I did wind up beating the game, and it was awesome, but the real fun for me came from the exploration, just wandering around and seeing what I could find, doing side quests, finding shrines. Similar to boss fights in Elden Ring, many shrines are pretty unmemorable, but it is the act of discovering the boss or the shrine that gave me the most enjoyment. Like I had happened onto something and I had no idea what it would lead to or what it would reward me with. For me, that is what made Breath of the Wild so addicting and fun to play. It was all about the journey, not the destination, and Elden Ring gave me those exact same vibes. It is the first game to grip me in the way Breath of the Wild did almost a decade ago. I've not touched Breath of the Wild since. I played Tears of the Kingdom, and I had fun exploring all around that game as well, but it never captured me like Breath of the Wild. I never did beat the main story of Tears of the Kingdom. I don't regret my time with it, and when I'm traveling, I still will play it on the plane or train from time to time, but I am fully okay with never beating that main story. For whatever reason, the game just didn't stick with me in the same way as its predecessor. I'm not sure why it didn't hook me the same, but it just didn't. But with Elden Ring, it clicked in the exact same way. I was hooked. Every day, I couldn't wait to hop on stream and see what I would discover today. See what cool new bosses or areas I would happen onto, to discover its secrets and just live within this incredible world. Unlike Breath of the Wild, this is one of the prettiest games I've ever played. So often, I just had to stop and take in the scenery. The amount of jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring levels From Software created here is mind-blowing. So many people say they wish they could go back to that first time that you open the door and see Limgrave. I get why people say that. It's more that they wish they could go back to the start of the game for the first time and rediscover everything with fresh eyes, but that moment didn't hit me like it maybe should have. For me, this wasn't my aha moment. I didn't really see it coming because you're kind of in this cave and then boom, here you are in the lands between, and Limgrave is beautiful, but I knew the game was open world, so I sort of knew at some point I would have to enter that world. My aha moment was the Siofra River Well. I was just exploring around, I go up to a nondescript building, it has an elevator, and it leads you to an entire underground city. The entrance is fucking beautiful, so big props there. But it was more the fact that this random, totally missable building could lead to such a vast area of the game. You could go an entire playthrough and never see this. I absolutely love this. Jeez Louise, man. I love that FromSoft designs their games without worrying about the player missing content. They trust players to explore and experiment. I remember in Dark Souls 3 being so shocked on how to access Archdragon Peak. You friggin' emote next to a statue and it leads to an entirely new level with one of the best boss fights in the series. It is these secrets that make the worlds that From Software designs so memorable, but equally and more importantly, it makes them worth exploring. I loved taking my sweet ass time through every single area of the game, and yet still, despite being as diligent as I thought possible, I missed many things. There are things that I have no idea that I missed, but again, that is a beautiful part of this game. Many people came into my chat and said they had no idea where I was despite beating the game 4 times. So I had happened upon some hidden areas that even veterans of Elden Ring had never seen, but I know I still missed some. Someone asked me about a quest at one point, and turns out I had never found her in that cave. I never even met that NPC, and I maybe never will. But it is that exact design that makes the world so worth exploring. You don't feel like you're wasting time by doing so. Every stream before I hit live, I had an idea of what I would do that stream. Okay, today I'm going to mainline the story a bit and do these things that I know I'm missing. Then I hop in a coffin or open a transporter chest and find some secret area, and then 4 hours goes by and I got nothing done that I had planned to do. But I want to be clear, this is a good thing. It is what made this game so much fun for me, that I could head out in any direction and then just go where the game takes me. And like I said, as thorough as I tried to be, I still missed certain caves or certain bosses or certain NPCs. It's honestly wild to me, and obviously encourages replayability. As I said, I went into this game blind and I looked nothing up, but I'm privileged because I would get tips from my chat like how to access certain towers by emoting with a certain headpiece on. I don't know who could possibly figure these puzzles out, but I'm grateful they exist, and even more grateful that I have a chat who doesn't spoil things for me, but will tell me about these things if I'm totally stuck. It's honestly the best way to enjoy these games in my opinion, and I'm super grateful for my chat. I appreciate all of you and your support. But as I mentioned, it's all these moments that make the game so memorable and enjoyable and rewarding to explore. I think my most hyped moment was getting to Volcano Manor. I was fighting a virgin in Carria Manor and it killed me by consuming me. Little did I know, this actually transports you to a hidden area. I know these mechanics exist, but this was my first time having it happen naturally. What the hell is this? Hell yeah. Finally I got one of these in a game. I've still never got it in Silksong. I've played through Silksong 3 full times and I have yet to get caught and taken to the prison. Again, I know it exists, but A, it's never happened to me, and B, I could look up how to do it, but then that sort of takes the magic away. I was told about the dude carrying a sack in Bloodborne that transports you, but I got to experience this one organically for the first time, and it was exhilarating. These moments are what you really remember about a game. My chat was losing it because they knew what I had just done, but it took me a few seconds to realize. But it is these exact moments that make every single playthrough of the game so unique. I started out and explored Limgrave, fought Tree Sentinel a bit, and saw my damage was ass, so I set out exploring to get more powerful. By the end of my first stream, 6 hours into the game, I had beaten the Tree Sentinel, a boss that was whooping my ass a few hours earlier. I found myself in Caelid shortly after and could tell that I was underleveled, but because I know that these games are supposed to be challenging, I kept toughing it out. This allowed me to level up a lot, and I got all the way to the end of Caelid, and I couldn't access the final boss because we were waiting for the big ceremony. I took this to mean that I had to progress the story, so that's exactly what I did. As a result, I was overleveled as hell for Stormveil Castle, which is fine. I had earned my newfound power, but the point is to illustrate that you can go through this game in almost any way, the only real limiter being your mechanical skill. Like, there are bosses that you know you're clearly underleveled for, but if you want to beat your head against the wall and take them down, the game lets you do that. Starscourge or Dawn being locked out until you progress is one of the few times where you're limited in your exploration and progression. So like I said, I tried to mainline the story and I went back to Carrion Manor, and I had explored pretty much all of the world that I could have, at least to my knowledge. And then when I finally got there, quite overleveled, I wound up in Volcano Manor. So I explored all of Volcano Manor, then wound up at Mount Gelmir, and then explored all of that as well. Because of this, by the time I actually got to the manor, I was 1 or 2 shotting the wizards, and I took down Renala on my first attempt with total ease. Starscourge or Dawn was much of the same. I fought him once solo just to see what the fight was about. Then I wanted to summon all the NPCs on my second attempt because I had never seen so many NPCs available in a fight, and like I said, they made this big pomp and circumstance about this incredible ceremony, so I just kind of wanted to live it in game. I beat every Elder boss in the game without any NPCs or summons, and as much as I like to beat every boss solo, this felt worth it because, again, the story hyped it up as a big festival, so it just felt right. As a result, I dumpstered Dawn on my second attempt and almost completely skipped his second phase transition. Honestly, the hype before the fight was palpable. They did a great job setting this up as an extravagant event, but because of my level, the fight didn't match the hype. But that is my fault for being so overleveled. It's hard to criticize this design choice because it's a direct consequence of them giving you so much freedom to explore the open world. Would I love for every boss fight, especially every main story boss fight, to be as perfectly balanced as they are in Sekiro? Yes. But for them to be able to do that would mean it would take away everything that makes Elden Ring so great. This game gives you so much freedom to explore, so many options to make overpowered builds, that I will gladly sacrifice boss balance in the name of player agency. You hear the term diegetic storytelling a lot, which basically just means that everything you are being told is cohesive. The world matches the story. The boss fight being this massive intimidating figure that you need a small army to take down. If you're level 1, then this celebration and the stakes would match the boss fight. But because I was so overleveled by this point, it was totally underwhelming given what the story was hyping it up as. But again, in life, all things require compromise, and the compromise Elden Ring had to make was that by giving you so much freedom, you may very well overlevel certain bosses, and honestly, I think they made the right choice. I would much rather have gotten to experience Elden Ring in the way that I did than to have the game more on rails just for the sake of balance. I already touched on my love for Sekiro, and a big reason for that is that every boss required you to learn its moveset. There are no builds per se in Sekiro, everyone uses the same katana. There was also very minimal leveling, mostly just getting more health and more flasks to replenish said health. As a result, the game was much easier to balance because there was one main playstyle to balance around. This is what makes Sekiro bosses so damn good and so satisfying to beat. For everyone. You all fight the bosses under nearly identical circumstances. As a result, people call this the hardest FromSoft game, because you can't really cheese these bosses. You have to get good. In Elden Ring, it is completely the opposite. The amount of weapons and playstyles you can choose from is nearly infinite. Again, this results in a give and take, and again, I think FromSoft made the right concessions here. They accept that the player base is going to find broken playstyles and ways to cheese bosses, but the benefit of this is giving players a near infinite way of playing the game. I still have never cast a spell in a From Software game. I like beating on things with swords, but I am so glad that those other options exist for people who like that playstyle. Do I think Sekiro would be better with more options? No, I do not. The game has an identity and it sticks to it wholeheartedly. But do I think Elden Ring is better thanks to the litany of options? Yes, I do. Again, that is the identity of this game and it sticks to it wholeheartedly. The amount of broken shit you can do in this game is crazy, and that is coming from someone with a surface level knowledge of build crafting in Elden Ring. But some players in my chat sent me clips of them destroying the hardest bosses in the game in a few hits, thanks to their expert build crafting. Towards the end of the game, I started to finally understand some of this and dabble in it. I got a great katana late in my playthrough of the DLC, and I immediately knew it would help me cook dragons because it did extra damage to dragons. Being in the Mountain of the Dragons, I upgraded it, threw it on, and put a couple talismans on to make its special attack hit even harder. As a result, I once again had a Star Scourge Radahn moment. I cooked Baal the Dread, widely regarded as the best dragon fight in the series, and though I have very limited experience, I can see why that fight is so beloved. I do wish I spent a little more time learning the actual fight with a lesser powered weapon and then whooping on him, but I was just so excited to finally be cooking a boss in the DLC that I was just having too much fun to stop. I stuck with this weapon for the remainder of the DLC until the final boss. With Promised Concert Radahn, I stuck with my Dragon Killer Katana, but in Phase 2, it was too hard to make it work. Sure, I could have spent many hours learning the attack patterns in perfect detail to maybe make it work, and this would have been satisfying in its own right, but I decided to go back to what I love doing, and that is making hard things easy. You see, with Destiny 2, I was an expert at that game. There was nothing about build crafting and sandbox that I didn't know. I enjoyed making hard things seem easy and then using that knowledge to teach people with my YouTube channel. One guy in my chat even told me I loved Elden Ring before I even played it, because he knew of my work in D2. I like to solo flawless dungeons and Grandmaster strikes, some of the toughest content in the game, even for a 3-man fire team. I enjoyed doing it solo. I love a good challenge. And as much as I would have loved to master Promised Concert Radahn like I had to in Sekiro with Sword Saint Ishin and some of the hard bosses in that, I decided it'd probably be fun to find a way to make him easier for the common gamer. Phase 1 of that fight was honestly really fun and quite easy to get a hang of, but Phase 2 was pretty crazy. So rather than practicing Phase 2 for hours, I decided to do 10 minutes of build crafting. I first threw on a Great Shield and tested it with my Great Stars, a weapon that I had used on some of the toughest boss fights in the game, including what I used to beat Melania. This wasn't the best, so I tried a Spear, for the first time in my playthrough on the final boss. This allowed me to block while being able to attack. I then leveled up my shield and spear and threw on defensive talismans and proceeded to beat Radahn easily on my first attempt with a proper build. I'd learned his moveset enough for my attempts with my great katana, so I knew how to dodge the AoE attacks that you can't block with a shield, but then for all the sword attacks, I just sat behind my shield poking him down and then recovering stamina when I had to. It was extremely simple. The victory did feel a little hollow at the time because I switched up so early. Like I said, I do love a good challenge, and this fight felt like the easy way out, but the more I reflect on it now, I'm glad I did this. The boss, widely regarded as the toughest in FromSoft history, and I used my knowledge from the past 150 hours of my playthrough to demolish him with ease. It was satisfying in its own right, the culmination of my 4-month Souls journey. In Demon Souls, I often forgot to spend my souls after beating a boss fight, only to then continue exploring and lose them in heartbreaking fashion. So then, I was more underleveled in that game than I should have been. Fast forward to the end of my journey a few months later, I was overleveled for the final boss thanks to my diligence exploring the lands between and finding every Skadgetry fragment in the Realm of Shadow, again thanks to obsessive exploration. This paid off with me getting to kill the boss, not with mechanical skill, but with the true skill gap, knowledge. Because the truth is, I'm sure every boss in this game has exploitable weaknesses. My chat even gave me some tips for some. Namely, the Deathrite birds being super weak to holy damage. A chatter told me how to apply holy damage with one weapon to another weapon. I did this and I smoked it in just 3 hits. Jester is the chatter that gave me heads up on that method, and he shared with us a few builds that he's used to absolutely cook Promised Concert Radahn. This, again, is what makes Elden Ring so great. You have people doing rune level 1 runs and slowly chipping away at a boss and dodging every attack perfectly. That's extremely satisfying for them, and I'm glad they're able to do it. On the flip side, you have other people trying to use methods and strategies that the game freely gives you to exploit in the most broken ways to cook a boss. But really, both sides of the coin just come down to knowledge. One is the knowledge of knowing exactly when to dodge and when to attack. The other is how to leverage every advantage at your disposal to dispatch a boss as easily as possible. Both are equally worthy in my opinion. I know how much theory crafting some of this takes. I can't do it in Elden Ring because I just don't have that knowledge, but I used to do it in Destiny 2. Again, my goal was to make the hardest content as easy and approachable to beat as possible. Sure, I could have used stronger and more risky and tough to pull off builds, but that wouldn't help the average player. Something like my shield and spear build for Radahn is about as approachable of a way as I can think to beat that guy. You just need stamina management and to dodge a few AoE attacks. And surely anyone who has come that far in Elden Ring already to the final boss of the DLC would surely be able to pull that off. Which is another reason why Elden Ring is so great. It is by far the most approachable game of the series, directly thanks to all these different playstyles. The only limiter in this game is a person's desire to beat it. If a boss is too hard for you to figure out, there's a whole wiki online showing what every boss is weak to. I was just told how to apply holy damage to another weapon, and I was able to smoke a Deathrite bird in 3 hits. If I wanted to dive into the wiki, I could find ways to exploit every single boss in this game. And to be honest, I might. This is the first game that I've played since Destiny 2 that has really given me that itch to want to optimize the hell out of it, to make every boss seem more approachable to the average person, because it gives you all the tools you need. Sadly, I missed the boat a bit, and I'm sure most of the videos already exist on YouTube, but I just love the fact that those videos can exist at all. It speaks to how approachable the game is, and I think that's great, because this is a game very much worth playing. I do think that the so-called difficulty is vastly overhyped for all the Souls games. They really aren't that tough. But at the same time, I do love that Elden Ring has been recognized as the most approachable and may inspire others to go play those other games now, because they too are games well worth experiencing. One unfortunate consequence of all these options is that From Software has had to crank up the boss difficulty, and I think this is a detriment to some of the boss fights. Again, this isn't some get good problem here. I beat every boss in the game, but that doesn't mean they were all fun. Yes, lots of the bosses were reskins, that doesn't bother me. There are a few aspects of the boss design that does bother me, however. Let's talk about Malekith and Beast Clergyman, as this is the most egregious example in my opinion. It's a 2-phase fight, with the first phase being against a Beast Clergyman, and this boss has nearly no openings, and never really stops attacking. Sure, I could have stuck it out and practiced this fight for hours to learn how to no-hit him. I know I'm more than capable of that, but the boss fight was not fun. I didn't want to do that because I wasn't having fun. It is not fun to fight a boss that never stops attacking. A boss that is spastic as fuck and jumps around the arena, but most egregiously, has no obvious attack windows. This was my biggest problem. I loved Sir Alon in the Dark Souls 2 DLC. I loved Artorias in Dark Souls 1 DLC. I loved Nameless King and Slave Knight Gale and Sister Fried and Pontiff Sullivan in Dark Souls 3. I adore the final boss in Sekiro, as it's a culmination of everything you've learned through the game. You must use every move at your disposal to overcome him. You have to learn his entire moveset and how to dodge each attack. But you know what all those attacks end in? An opening, a punish window. Sure, it may be brief, and sure, it may be tough to learn all of them, but they all do have a window. With Malekith, the first phase, he is Beast Clergyman, and I just found it faster to trade blows with him to push to second phase. That is not satisfying to me. I like to learn the fight and try to avoid damage, but the windows were so quick and so infrequent that I cannot be asked to stretch phase 1 to 3 minutes when I know it's easier to just go balls out and hit trade to get to second phase in half the time. And then second phase, you just have a totally spastic boss who feels like he never stops attacking. Yes, I am aware there are punish windows, but they're very unobvious, which makes learning the fight unenjoyable as hell to me. I don't want to sit there and guess and experiment on what is an attack window for an hour. The other boss fights in other games teach you the windows by showing you. This is a much more satisfying way to learn. Having to guess what is an opening and what isn't nearly as much fun to figure out. I actually love the Messmer fight in the DLC. He has insane attacks, much like Malekith, but at the end of them, there's a clear opening to attack. Rolana is a super cool fight, but I feel like she lands somewhere in between. Her windows are less obvious, not as egregious as Malekith, but not as clear as Mesmer. I feel like Mesmer is sort of the perfect balance. He's got some wild and punishing combos, but they're totally learnable, and then if you learn them, you're rewarded with a clear punish window. With Malekith, it just really felt like there wasn't a clear window, and that it felt like he was always moving, and you just couldn't get a lick in anywhere. Again, I know that isn't totally true and that there are openings, but it was not intuitive to learn. That to me was the big differentiator, intuitiveness. I beat the final boss of every Souls game on my first try, not because I'm some god gamer, but because when I got to them, A, I was pretty high level, but B, because they have intuitive movesets, and at the end of the game, you've learnt the combat enough to be able to reliably predict attacks. When a boss winds up, the wind-up animation is somewhat predictable, in that you know when the boss is about to attack. The sound cues also help a lot as well. A lot of the late game bosses in Elden Ring have purposeful attack delays for no reason other than to trip up the player. In all the other Souls games, there is a duel-like element to the fights. The boss attacks, then you attack it. You sort of trade back and forth, and I love that back and forth. In some Elden Ring boss fights, it just felt like the boss was constantly on the offensive, doing 10-hit combos just for you to get in a measly light attack, and then they follow up with another flurry. It isn't all that hard, you just have to be more patient, but I like to be as aggressive as possible on bosses, so this just made it more tedious. It was the same problem I had with Demon Souls. The levels were purposely designed to make you have to fight every enemy. They weren't that difficult, but they gave you no counterplay. They simply blocked your path. You couldn't use movement to get by them. There was one way to deal with them, and that was to slowly and methodically take them out one by one. This was extremely boring and unengaging to me, but most importantly, it wasn't fun. In Elden Ring, every new area I got to, I always killed all the enemies my first time exploring the area because I wanted to look for any items that I could find. But after that, I knew what was in the area, so I ran by a lot of the enemies my second time through. But the game lets you do that if you have the skills to dodge attacks and run by them. Demon Souls did not give this option. So with the boss fights, again, I had the same issue. It isn't that dodging 10 attacks is all that much harder than dodging 2 attacks. It is that you feel like the balance is 95% dodging and 5% attacking, instead of the much more balanced ratio in the other Souls games, where you dodge some attacks and then you get an attack window. Dodge more, attack again. The ratio was off on a lot of these bosses, and then, like I said, some just had purposefully odd timing on their attacks, delays that are there for no other reason than to trick you. Once you know the delay, it isn't that hard to dodge it after that, but again, for me, it was just more that it didn't feel natural or intuitive, not that it was overly hard or punishing. Radahn had an attack where he would do a somersault and oftentimes that's it, but sometimes he would follow up with another somersault. I could not tell when he would or when he wouldn't follow up with that second somersault. See? If you try to cheat, then he does that. It just sucks because depending what his follow-up from that is, I always take damage. Ultimately, I just chose to do my L2 charge attack, and if he did a somersault again, I would take damage, because not L2ing, or waiting to confirm that his attack was done, would lead to me taking damage on the follow-up. I understand that the solution here is to just do a quicker attack and not be greedy, but I don't find that as fun. Like I said, I like to be aggressive. It's one thing if it's consistent, but it isn't. In some cases, I could get off a full L2 and be totally fine. In others, he does a quick follow-up and I take damage. And in others, he'll somersault again and hit me before my attack goes off. I know the outcomes and how to avoid each one, but again, going for damage is the best option because he's tanky as hell and I just want to get to second phase so I can practice the hard part of the fight. This could just be a weapon selection issue by me, and changing my weapon is the solution, which, as I stated, I did and absolutely cooked them. But again, this is my issue with a lot of the bosses. It negates many playstyles, something that I praise the game for giving the player the option to utilize. I understand adapting and changing your strategy is often a skill in its own right, and maybe that's the intent here, but I feel like some of the bosses and their movesets limit the player too much. And Malenia is the best example of this. She is actually a really fun fight for the most part. One of my favorite things about her is that she rewards aggression. I have had first phases where I cooked her in like a minute, just by playing super aggressively. You can interrupt a lot of her attacks, however, not all of them, which again comes back to that inconsistency that I don't like. Sometimes she has hyper armor and punishes you despite you hitting her. Fine, you have to hesitate and not interrupt her at every available opportunity. This hesitation though will mean that you need to do a light attack instead of a heavy, or may just end up taking damage at the end of the attack anyways. So you're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't. The reason I could cook her sometimes and other times not was purely RNG, and a dice roll in a boss fight just isn't that fun, at least not in my experience. Again, I was able to overcome and adapt, but it didn't make the fight any more fun. But naturally, the biggest problem with this fight is waterfowl. It's simply an unfair move, I don't care. The initial volley, if you're close to it, is almost sure to hit you, and that feels really bad. I reluctantly threw on a shield because I could not understand how to avoid the initial attack if you were right up on her. If you had distance, then you can just run back. I could dodge it consistently then, but I like playing aggressively, so it left me with two options. Play aggressively and have to use a shield when she whips out that bullshit move, or play passively later in the fight trying to bait out the attack so that you can outspace it and avoid it. Ultimately, I opted for the shield as it allowed me to continue to play aggressively without getting one-shot by an OP move. Again, I figured out the solution and adapted, but it didn't make the fight any more satisfying. In fact, it made it less fun. Melania would absolutely be a better fight if they just removed waterfowl, or gave it a longer windup, allow you to get back and create distance even if you're up close so that you can reasonably dodge it without needing a shield. Again, I had little issue dodging it when I had distance. The problem was when she goes to do it, if you're on top of her, you cannot outrange it in time. My only other issue with her is her second phase. The butterflies are too distracting, and it makes it hard to recognize what attack she's about to do. I had her first phase down to a science outside of waterfowl, but second phase, I couldn't see her tells nearly as well. This is also a problem in other fights, as I feel FromSoft went a little too far on spectacle in some of the boss fights, because I actually did have the same issue with second phase of her Dawn. Phase 1 I could damage and punish easily. In fact, with Phase 1, I thought he may be my favorite boss. I thought the attacks were super well telegraphed and that they did a great job with sound cues on the attacks as well. And then you could also tell when the attack was clearly over for a punish window, for the most part. It was really good boss design in my opinion. There's one attack where he does an AoE ground slam, but again, it is well cued, and after one or two attempts, you know it's coming, so you add in an extra dodge. But second phase, there's just too much clutter on the screen, too much bullshit. Midra also had a similar problem. These boss fights would all be much better without the visual noise. I know it looks cool and adds spectacle, but it overwhelms the senses and makes the fight harder in what I think is a cheap way. Not being able to accurately recognize the attack that is coming is not the same as not being able to handle it. My one issue with the Mesmer fight was second phase being difficult for me to just track what was going on, even though most people say second phase is easier. This could just be a me issue, as I struggled on Lost Lace and Silksong and Absolute Radiance and Hollow Knight for the exact same reasons. They have attacks that blend in with the environment, and it's very hard for me to recognize what attack was coming at the time. It sucks and it bothers me no matter the game. Elden Ring has a lot of stuff like this. Dancing Lion is actually the boss that took me the longest in the DLC, simply because of the patented camera issues that come with FromSoft games. So when I face this boss again later in the Ancient Ruins, I asked my chat what it was weak to, I then threw on a fire sword and I cooked its ass. Not because I think I'm incapable of beating the boss more fairly, but just because I didn't find it fun to do so. The alien boss, Estelle, was one of my least favorite in the game simply because I could rarely even see the fucking attack that it was telegraphing. I don't think it's as hard as it is obnoxious, but again, these could just be me issues. I didn't like Estelle or Dancing Lion because I couldn't recognize their attacks, where objectively harder bosses like Mesmer or Rolana or even Midra I quite enjoyed because I could at least react to the boss's attacks, or if I fucked it up, at least it was on me, not the camera or the visual noise. A lot of the bosses in this game could have been fixed with a less is more approach. Sure, veterans may have found the game too easy, but I don't know, man. I just like dueling fights. Lace 2.0 in Silksong is a top tier fight because you are constantly trading blows. Spacing and timing is crucial. The windows are short, but they're there. Demon of Hatred is a wonderful boss in Sekiro for the same reason. The windows are there, but you have to capitalize and be ready when they show up. And I already spoke how much I like Sir Alon in Dark Souls 2. It was a duel, and those are my favorite types of fights. I found in Elden Ring, like I said before, it was just too one-sided. Waiting for a boss to finish a 10-hit combo where he seemingly never stops attacking, just for you to get a tiny window where anything more than a heavy attack will get you clipped on the follow-up. Even charged heavies were very tight. Again, you can say get good, but that's how I feel. It was too much of the boss being the aggressor with too few punish windows. That's not to say it was all bad though. You can do stagger damage to knock bosses and then get a riposte or a critical hit. This was always very satisfying to pull off. Additionally, L2 attacks in this game are freaking awesome. I didn't use a single special move in any of the Souls games because they just weren't worth it at all. In Elden Ring, I immediately was using my sheath attack on the Uji Katana, and once I got the Bloodhound Fang, my chat was calling it L2den Ring. I leaned on that shit so much. And as I said, by the end of the game, I was abusing my Dragon Killer L2 move. I love that they made so many of these attacks feel very powerful, and they were a lot of fun to use on all manner of weapons. The combat is exceptional in this game, easily the best in the series. The addition of an actual jump button made traversal much more enjoyable, even if it was still jank at times, but it was massively better than any other games in the series. Speaking of a jump button, it also adds a huge dimension to combat, by being able to jump over certain attacks and jump attack and massively stagger enemies. It's very satisfying. Oh, I jumped it! Haha! I fucking jumped it, styled on him! Let's go! What a sick finish. The addition of Torrent was also awesome, even though he was often janky and horseback combat didn't feel great. I also really like the sneaky stealth attacks that you can do. In Dark Souls 3, I praised the game for all the quality of life additions. Chief among them was them actually showing you how many souls you get for a soul. But you had to go to a vendor to do this. In Elden Ring, it just tells you. I can't tell you how happy this made me because I always min-max my soul usage to get the most levels possible. Little things like this added up to make such a difference. They also added the mausoleums so you could get multiple boss souls to unlock their weapons, and unlocking and upgrading weapons has truly never been easier. I got so many smithing stones in my playthrough, and then you can even buy all but the highest rarity by the end of the game, so it allows you to level up so many different weapons. And in a game that encourages you to try different playstyles, this is great. In the other Souls games, I stuck to like one good weapon my whole playthrough because it was too hard to level multiple weapons. In Elden Ring, I use like 6 different weapons fairly routinely. It may not sound like a lot, but for me, as someone who mostly just used one, it was awesome being able to switch if I wanted to and not feel dumb for doing so because the other weapon was super underleveled. So that was a great quality of life addition. One thing that I do wish they brought back was bonfire ascetics from Dark Souls 2, as I would love to fight Promise Consort Radahn again, but more straight up rather than cheesing him with a shield and spear. Speaking of ascetics that you burn at bonfires, this game has sights of grace and they are plentiful. I really liked this. A lot of people praise having to go slowly and methodically through areas, but I already do this. But once you fully cleared an area once, I don't see why you have to keep proving that you can get through it. So yes, I like the features and the seamlessness that this provides. It was one of my largest complaints with Demon Souls. It was tedium for tedium's sake. In Elden Ring, they rightly moved on from this design choice. The game still took me 150 hours to beat because, like I said, I was exploring everything. I didn't need to keep working my way through areas or doing boss run backs to artificially extend my playtime. And speaking of boss run backs, thank you for the Stakes America. Those two are greatly appreciated. I really hope this is the new norm for From Software games. You can also get vendor bell bearings to access all the items at the Roundtable Hold, which is your safe hub, so to speak. Also at the Hold, you have a weaponsmith who, as I briefly mentioned, can upgrade any weapon. Again, I like this a lot. The seamlessness of upgrading and the vast amount of materials that you get through your playthrough mean you can level up so many weapons. Sure, it was cool in Dark Souls 1 how different blacksmiths upgraded different weapons, but I like just being able to do it all at one place. But yeah, I'll happily upgrade like a dozen weapons now for future New Game Plus runs. Speaking of, larval tiers allow you to respec your stats, and I have over a dozen of those also, so this allows you to experiment even more by switching up your stats. Another thing that encourages repeat playthroughs are the quests. This game has a ton of different quests and NPCs. I didn't do all of them, and of the ones I did do, many had multiple options. So on future playthroughs, I would like to see the other options that I could have chosen and earn the unique rewards from choosing the new options. On the topic of the quests though, probably the only time I wasn't loving the game was in one stream where I was pretty far into the main story and my chat said I should go talk to some NPCs, otherwise I'd be locked out of progressing their quests. So I had to go around to these obscure places and talk to people and advance their quests. It was sort of tedious and felt like checklist busy work, where for most of the game, I was just going wherever the hell I wanted and finding and experiencing things on my own. Obviously I didn't have to do this, but like I said, I don't like missing things if I can avoid it. And I think it really sucks that you can miss many NPC quests because you advance too far and they die or something, or you're locked out for whatever reason. I think the NPC quests are too obscure in these games, and I've always thought that. I think they are generally very cool, and when you do them and accomplish them and complete all the tasks, it is neat, but actually figuring out how to do them requires a PhD in From Software game design. Sure, it adds to the mystery and intrigue, and again, it's From Software being as vague as possible and trusting the players to figure things out on their own, but let's be real, 99.9% of players are looking up guides on how to do these quests, and I think that balance is off. I don't want them to swing wildly in the other direction and have a bunch of hand-holding and a million quest objectives littering your screen, but a bit of guidance would be welcomed. For what it's worth, I actually really liked the Volcano Manor questline where they marked high-value targets on your map for you to go and kill. It was fun to have a bit of direction for once. I really enjoyed the quests that I did do, I just wish it was easier to figure out for the common gamer. But a big shout out to my chat for the help on many of these. There are also tons of armor and weapons that you can get from enemies, so the amount of gear you can unlock in this game is crazy. And speaking of the enemies, I've praised the enemy variety in all the Souls games, but this game takes it to a new level. I have no idea how many unique enemies are in this game, but there's got to be at least 100. Some of them do suck ass to fight, like the knife birds in Stormvale Castle, but I still appreciate the massive variety. And I didn't touch on it enough, but the environmental design is top tier. So many areas feel totally distinct and unique. The red scarlet swamps of Caelid. Everything about Caelid feels scary and oppressive and uninviting, like it doesn't want you to be there. Even the music in that area is very off-putting. And speaking of music, some of the boss tracks are once again top tier. They just do an awesome job of world design and creating a feeling. The ancient ruins of Rao in the DLC were peak FromSoft. They were immensely confusing and they loop back around on themselves constantly. The levels of verticality and interconnectedness in the entire DLC was shocking and quintessential FromSoft. So much so that I didn't even like the ruins. I can appreciate them and I think they look beautiful, like the area is stunning, but they were obnoxious as shit to navigate. Like I said, FromSoft went a little crazy with their boss design in some instances where a less is more approach would have made them more fun to fight. Well, same with some of the DLC areas. They were super annoying to navigate a lot of the time. It just felt like FromSoft cranked the dial to 11 sometimes, and it was a little over the top. Crumbling Farum Azula and all the dragons gave me flashbacks to the Dragon Aerie in Dark Souls 2. I could go on, honestly praising every biome, but you get the point. The levels are beautifully crafted and full of artistic intent. I'm sure there are tons of visual lore details that I didn't even pick up on as well. I said it earlier, but I haven't been this enraptured with an open world since Breath of the Wild. I haven't wanted to dive deeper into a universe than this since Destiny 2, a game that I played religiously for 8 years. If that isn't the highest praise that I can give a game, then I don't know what is. It wasn't until I beat Radon and completed the DLC that it hit me that the journey was finally over. 115 hours for the base game, 35 hours for the DLC, 150 hours total, and it finally came to an end. But I didn't want it to. I was hit with a bit of a wave of sadness. Not like super sad, like I'm grateful for the journey, but more just a bittersweet feeling that I will never have that first time experience again. But what an experience it was. I had heard so much about how Bloodborne was so many people's favorite FromSoft game, and when I played it, I was extremely disappointed because I really didn't think it was that great. So I had a bit of apprehension going into Elden Ring that maybe it was overrated like Bloodborne. Thankfully, it was not in the slightest. This game was everything people have hyped it up to be and more. Is it flawless? Absolutely not. It has many flaws. But as I said, the surrounding world is so damn great and impressive that it makes its shortcomings minor speed bumps rather than enjoyment-shattering mistakes. As I said at the top, the game is greater than the sum of its parts. You could talk about how they reuse too many bosses, sure. But I would rather fight numerous bosses and get cool rewards, even if some are recycled, than have the open world feel smaller and have it feel like there's less to do. All the areas have unique dungeons and ruins to explore. Sure, they can be a bit samey, but again, for me, it just gave me more to explore. The same way you can say shrines are repetitive in Zelda. Yes, they are, but for me, the excitement came from finding the shrine and being excited about what I would earn, rather than the shrine itself being full of innovative enemies, puzzles, or designs. Are the ruins repetitive and samey? Yes. But again, for me, the excitement was finding that area that could be holding a super overpowered Ash of War. I didn't even really touch on Ashes of War or the build crafting in this game, but those were some amazing additions as well. And the dungeons were a massive step up from Bloodborne. I hated them in that game, but here, it was always a fun palate cleanser to go through them when I discovered them, and they had way more innovation in Elden Ring when it came to layouts and how to solve their puzzles than they did in Bloodborne. Is each one amazing? No, but they're more than serviceable. Again, far better than Bloodborne. Like I said, on its own, not great, but when they are just one tiny thing of a vast and sprawling open world with infinite things to discover, they were very fun to happen across and clear your way through for a little reward at the end. I always felt like I was being rewarded for exploring in this game, and I think that is the biggest compliment I can give to any open world game. This game captured me in a way that I did not expect, and I really can't praise it enough. Anyways, I think that's it for the video. I plan on making a tier list of the Souls games and a couple other FromSoft related videos, so subscribe if you want to see those. If you want to watch me on Twitch, follow me at itstizzle7. I'll be playing Red Dead 1 and 2 at some point before GTA 6 comes out, so yeah, come through if any of that interests you. Lastly, thanks so much for watching to the end if you're still here, it means a lot. Leave your thoughts on Elden Ring below and tell me about your first playthrough experience. I really want to hear it. I absolutely love this game. Thanks for watching and take care.